Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. I am Elizabeth Corr.
And I'm Katherine Corr.
And together we write young adult fantasy.
We've written 5 books together so far. We're going to talk to you today a little bit about the books that we've written, a little bit about our writing process as a duo, and we're going to give you some tips at the end about writing and writing with somebody else.
So to start with, I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about our trilogy, the Witch's Kiss trilogy. We wrote that, so that's the Witch's Kiss, the Witch's Tears, and the Witch's Blood between 2016 and 2018, and they are published by HarperCollins.
Should we just hold them up so everybody can see how lovely the covers are? If you just hold those ones just briefly. So we'll get them in the right order.
They are very lovely covers, rather.
No, the wrong order. That's it.
Yeah, very lovely colours. And Witch's Kiss is basically a modern day retelling of Sleeping Beauty set in Surrey. So instead of a sleeping princess, we have a sleeping prince called Jack. And instead of Prince Charming, who comes along to try and rescue him, we have a teenage witch, Mary, and her older brother, Leo. So as I said, it's a modern day retelling. Most of it is set in modern day Surrey, but some of it is set in the past in Anglo-Saxon England. And it's very much a sibling story more than anything else. There is a romance element to it, but we really wanted to write something which would reflect the very strong bond that we have as siblings.
That's right. So once we finished writing Witch's Blood, the last in the trilogy, we decided we wanted to have a go at writing some epic fantasy instead. So our most recent duology, which was published by Hotkey, is A Throne of Swans. And the sequel to that, which was A Crown of Talons, came out in January this year. So
very beautiful covers.
Yeah, more beautiful covers. So A Throne of Swans was loosely inspired by Swan Lake, and it's set in a world where the nobles can transform into birds that represent their ancestral bloodlines. But our hero, Katherine, hasn't been able to transform into a swan since she witnessed the brutal murder of her mother. So this story really follows her quest for answers and for revenge, and follows her. She takes a deep dive into the corrupt court ruled by her uncle, the king. And then we follow her adventures again in Crown of Talons. So it was quite a different process, I guess, in some ways, writing these books as opposed to the first trilogy. Do you want to talk a bit about the plot, how the process for that one worked?
Sure. Well, it sounds kind of obvious, but we started with the plot for The Witch's Kiss, in that we had an initial idea, and it took about a day and a half to work it out fully. We didn't, when we started it had a kind of sort of generic medieval kind of world building aspect, but so we hadn't really gone much further with that. We actually ended up changing the world building quite a lot, but as I said before, it's split between Anglo-Saxon England and modern day Surrey, and those two timelines are sort of weaved together throughout the story. So a lot of the world building, however, came after we nailed the plot down, and some of the characterization as well.
Yeah, so that was very much, the plot came first. I think with Throne of Swans, it was really the character came first. So we'd been thinking about Swan Lake as a possible, the sort of ballet Swan Lake and the different Swan Maiden stories. I'm thinking about the characters and particularly the villains. So originally Katherine was called Adil, and her father is still in the books called Rothbart, and they are the villains in Swan Lake. So we were thinking about their motivations, and so the characters came first. But obviously writing together, one of the things about our process is that we do have to pin down the plot first of all, or fairly early on, because we both need to literally be on the same page and know what we're writing.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. I think the other differences in terms of these books is really the world building, I think. Would you say?
Yes, because, we've obviously The Witch's Kiss is partly set in Surrey, and we've tried to kind of replicate sort of the lifestyle and interests of a 16-year-old girl and her slightly older brother. But we've also got some world building in the Anglo-Saxon period, and we've tried really, really hard to make that authentic, to make sure the architecture was right, to make sure the language was right. Katherine even got a book on Old English, Anglo-Saxon English, and started practicing it in the kitchen. I think even some of our spells were written out in Old English, and we did in fact go to Cambridge and get a scholar to check that we got the words right. So we tried really hard to make it authentic, but it's a different experience from The Throne of Swans because so much of it's set in the modern world.
So because we had such a good time with the world building that we did in The Witch's Kiss, that was one of the things that drove us to write an epic fantasy next. And obviously with this we got to create an entire world. So we came up with a map which was realised and brought to life very beautifully by Sally Baker. So that's in the front of the books.
Catherine's always wanted a map.
I've always wanted a map. So obviously we got to create an entire country and all its regions, but that means when we talked about all the things that would go into a country, like the government and the architecture and the language and the trade and the religion and the social systems and everything, and we got to design some really gorgeous dresses for Adu to wear as well, which was a lot of fun. So we had all this. Obviously, there's different processes depending partly on the style of the book and how the idea comes to you. But working together, I think, was really fun for us, or has been so far. Do we want to talk a little bit about sort of the good things and the bad things about working together?
The pros and cons, definitely. I mean, there are definite pros and cons. The pros are that obviously when you have somebody writing with you, it takes less time to produce a manuscript, or hopefully
in theory.
Yeah. Also, we play to each other's strengths. Catherine's very descriptive. She's very detailed. She likes being historically accurate. I'm a little bit less, focused on historical accuracy. For example, I could not get hung up as to whether there were rabbits in Anglo-Saxon England. I just didn't care. I didn't think anyone was going to care either. Well, yeah, there you go. But that's the sort of thing we tend to argue over. I like writing the dialogue. I like writing the funny bits. I like saving people. Katherine likes...
Yeah, I like killing people.
Gruesome.
Really horribly ways.
Yeah, she's very gruesome.
But I think the one thing about our process as a duo is that we've got different strengths. Like Liz said, I'm really good at... I can write quite fast and just get the words out there, and Liz is really, really good at editing. So that obviously is a compliment there, because I can end up... I think at one point I sent somebody to a country and brought them back from a different country, which I hadn't even noticed, but she picked up on. So working together from that perspective is great, and because we write a lot of each other's work, we end up with a kind of seamless voice, so people wouldn't be able to tell who's written which bits. The downside is that sometimes we rewrite without checking with the other person. So,
she does. She rewrites.
Yeah, so that can end up, we can end up arguing about who gets to keep which bit.
And occasionally we've ended up writing the same scene, and then we've had to argue over that. And we do argue off, because I really do not like inflicting pain and suffering on people, even the baddies. But occasionally we've fallen out as to who we're going to kill off, or, if we're going to kill them, when we're going to kill them. And I think that's why it's so handy having a professional editor on board, because, and those few occasions that Katherine and I just can't agree, we've gone to our editor and they've solved the problem for us.
Yes, that's right. And I think in The Witch's Blood, we had one scene which I loved because I'd written it, and Lizzie was like, no, it's too slow, and our editor agreed with her, and we took it out. And then in A Crown of Talons, there was a scene that I loved, because it's got lots of horrible things happening, and Lizzie thought it was too gruesome.
It made me cry. Katherine often makes me cry.
Yeah, but this time the editor agreed with me, so it stayed in. Yeah. So that was pretty good. So I suppose we should talk about our tips for writing. And I suppose my tip that I always say to everybody is to actually finish the book. We spent so many years just writing the beginnings of things because we always got distracted by the shiny new idea. Yes. But actually, if you want to try and get an agent or an editor, you can't send in just the beginning. You have to have it completed. So finish the book is the first tip.
Yeah, and do try to be as true to your story as possible. But do realise that even once you sent it in, an editor is probably going to change bits of it anyway. But what you need to do is make the best possible, put forward the best possible storyline and character development. But also, when you're sending in your manuscript to an agent, please do make sure that you try to avoid any silly and obvious mistakes with the formatting and with spelling and punctuation and so forth, because that tends to detract from your story. No matter how interesting brilliant your story is, if they see a manuscript with lots of silly mistakes, then they might pass over it when they shouldn't.
I would say our top tip for writing with somebody else is actually to pick the right person, because we really love writing together, and it's a lot of fun, and it's great to have that support there. And especially through there are lots of disappointing times in being published as well. But I think it's really important to pick somebody that you can get on with really well, you have a strong relationship with, so when you do argue about things, because you will argue about things.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world.
It's not going to be the end of the world.
I literally cannot fall out with her because she is, my main source of babysitting.
That's right. So I think, finish your book, polish your book, and then, but before that, I guess if you're writing the book first with somebody else, go and find the right person and then get out there and have fun writing.
Yeah, laugh a lot and have a lot of fun.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.